I'm going to cast the strongest Chaos Bolt in the world. Can you actually one-shot someone by putting every talent and every secondary stat into Chaos Bolt? Destruction Warlocks are masters of fire, shadow, fel, and chaos magic, wielding them to incinerate their enemies and tear apart their very souls. And among all of their abilities, Chaos Bolt is a spell that best embodies the spec's raw destructive power. It's the purest expression of chaos, aggression, and overwhelming force, everything that makes the Destruction Warlock what it is. One thing that makes Chaos Bolt unique is how it scales. First of all, it always critically strikes, and on top of that, its damage is further increased by your critical strike chance. That raised an important question. If the goal is to make Chaos Bolt hit as hard as possible, which stat actually gives us more damage? Critical strike or mastery? The answer isn't obvious, because mastery, chaotic energies, increases all of your spell damage and then adds an additional random damage bonus on top of that. So before stacking every stat into Chaos Bolt, I wanted to find out which one actually scales it better. So I prepared two different setups using the exact same gear and the same honor gear item level. One setup was focused on critical strike, while the other was focused on mastery. To keep the test fair, I cast a total of 20 Chaos Bolts with each setup. Then, I compared both the average damage and the highest hit to see which stat actually performed better. The results were not what I expected. Both the average damage and the highest hit were clearly higher with the mastery setup. When I first planned this video, I was actually going to build a full crit Warlock, but after seeing these results, I had no choice but to change the plan. Now it's time to upgrade the gears. Since the Season 1 2-piece tier bonus for Destruction Warlocks directly increases Chaos Bolt's damage, getting the 2-piece set is my first priority. Among the available tier slots, shoulders and chest both provide mastery, so those are the pieces I'm going to pick up first. I will buy the Conquest gear, then convert those pieces into tier set. Next comes the weapon. Among the Conquest weapons, I'm picking up the staff with mastery. Then, I'll craft almost everything else. Because most Conquest gear comes with a relatively high amount of versatility by default. Crafted gear, on the other hand, lets you choose exactly which secondary stat you want on each slot. More importantly, crafted PvP gear has a 1-to-1 distribution of its secondary stats, allowing you to trade away some versatility in exchange for a much more aggressive stat profile. One quick tip before you start crafting. If you're making a PvE gear, I recommend using a personal order to guarantee the highest possible quality. For PvP gear though, it doesn't really matter. Since PvP items automatically scale to their PvP item level, you can simply place a public order without sacrificing any performance. If you have chosen engineering as your profession, you get another advantage. For your helm, wrist, and boots, you can stack a single secondary stat instead of splitting the budget between the two. In this case, I'm putting everything into mastery. Here's the finished setup. I picked up the 2-piece tier bonus through the chest and shoulders, giving me both the mastery I wanted and the Chaos Bolt damage bonus from the tier set. For every other slot, I went with crafted gear, stacking as much mastery as possible. On top of that, thanks to engineering, I was able to put mastery as the only secondary stat on my helm, bracers, and boots, pushing the stat even further. And of course, every gem and enchant is also dedicated to mastery. With this setup, my final mastery rating reaches 1479, giving me nearly 90% mastery. That means all of my spells deal 45% increased damage, plus an additional random bonus of up to another 45% through mastery. So if the random roll is in my favor, Chaos Bolt can hit for almost twice its base damage. Wait a second, what about diminishing returns? That's a fair question. Once you stack too much of a single secondary stat, you start running into diminishing returns. After certain rating thresholds, every additional point of that stat becomes 10% less effective. For mastery, the first breakpoint starts at 1380 rating. So doesn't that mean this is not the perfect stat distribution? Of course not, but that's not what this video is about. The goal is not to find the most efficient meta build or the perfect stat distribution. The whole point is to see what happens when you push a single idea to the absolute limit. Come on, you guys are not watching this channel because you are trying to become gladiators. You are here for experiments and for the entertainment, so I'm not stopping here. I'm going to push mastery even further by using the Flask of the Magister, which you can also use in Battlegrounds. And I'm not done yet. To create the strongest Chaos Bolt possible, I'm even going to use the world buff. If you travel to Tanaan Jungle from the Warlord of Draenor expansion, you can find an item called the Tanaan Blood Orange. It increases all of your stats by 5% for 10 minutes. That's basically like adding half a trinket worth of power, and the buff even stays active when you enter a battleground. Wait a second, using a world buff? Isn't that unfair? Well, the battleground is already full of users exploiting world buffs. So if you can't beat them, join them, and then beat them. For the hero talent, I went with Hellcaller. There are several reasons for this, but the biggest one is through the Felvine. This talent increases Chaos Pulse damage by 35%, and while Malevolence is active, that bonus increases to 70%. Hellcaller also works better with internal combustion. When a Chaos Bolt hits, internal combustion consumes 5 seconds of either Immolate or Wither's damage over time effect and deals that damage instantly. And because Wither can be empowered far more heavily than Immolate through talents such as Hate Fury Rituals, it gives internal combustion a much stronger damage source. For the class talents, make sure to pick up Pact of Annihilin and the Pack of Eredar for the extra critical strike and intellect. In the destruction tree, start with Practice Chaos for more mastery, then take Scalding Flames to further increase your weather damage. After that, grab every talent that directly empowers Chaos Bolt: Ancient Remains, Chaotic Inferno, Ruin, and Improved Chaos Bolt. The most important talent, however, is Chaos Incarnate. Normally, Mastery grants a random damage bonus, but Chaos Incarnate guarantees that bonus is never lower than 70% of its maximum value. That makes it incredibly powerful for a full mastery build, since it greatly reduces the randomness while keeping your average damage much higher. Finally, take Crashing Chaos, which increases the damage of your next 8 Chaos Bolts by 25% after summoning Inferno. With that, everything is in place for the strongest Chaos Bolt possible. The rotation is surprisingly simple. All you need to do is apply Wither, use Conflagrate to reduce Chaos Bolt's cast time, summon your Inferno, activate Malevolence, and cast Chaos Bolt. That's it. There's no complicated setup, no stacks to build, and no need to crowd control your target just to make your burst land. Once Chaos Bolt is cast, it can't miss. All you have to do is make sure it hits as hard as possible. Of course, in a real battleground, your enemies are not just going to let you free cast. That's why positioning is so important. Fortunately, Warlocks are naturally tanky, and they have plenty of defensive tools to keep themselves alive, along with Demonic Gateway, Demonic Circle, and other abilities that let you outplay anyone trying to chase you down. Build up your soul shards, wait for the right opportunity, then unleash the combo. Now, back to our first question. How hard hits the world's strongest Chaos Bolt? And if we combine this build with buff like the Berserking, or consumables such as Saltwater Potion, can we actually one-shot someone with a single Chaos Bolt? So to pull this off, everything had to line up perfectly. I had to enter the battleground with the world buff and not get killed. I needed to secure the Berserking buff. My target couldn't be severely undergeared, or have something like a flag carrier debuff that would make the result meaningless. My Chaos Bolt couldn't get interrupted, and I had to make strategic use of the Saltwater Potion, which can only be used once every 5 minutes. Trying to get all of those conditions to line up meant playing countless battlegrounds. In the end, the answer was no. With the current PvP scaling system, one-shotting someone with a single Chaos Bolt just isn't possible. Because Blizzard has spent years tuning retail WoW PvP to prevent fights from ending in a single hit. With the most players sitting at around 500,000 to 600,000 health, Chaos Bolt seems to cap out at roughly 300,000 damage, making a true one-shot impossible. But here's the interesting part. Chaos Bolt has one major advantage over other signature burst abilities like Aim Shot or Meteor. Unlike aim shot, it deals chaos damage, so its damage is not reduced by enemy's armor rate, making it equally deadly for heavily armored classes like warriors. And unlike meteor, it is guaranteed to hit once the cast finishes. You don't have to predict movement or lock your target in crowd control. And unlike abilities with long cooldowns, Chaos Bolt is not limited to one cast every 30 seconds. As long as you have enough soul shards, you can fire 2 Chaos Bolts back to back. So today's conclusion is, even if you push the Chaos Bolt to its limit, you can't kill enemies with a single Chaos Bolt, but you can with 2 of them.